Welcome back to the episode. I'm so excited to have my first guest for today, but it's like my first guest two times because we tried to record yesterday and there were complications, which we're going to get into. But I want to welcome Jen McNerney to this podcast. I am so excited for you guys to listen to the wisdom that she has from the perspective of a speech therapist, but also a very powerful healer. And before we go any further with this, Jen, thank you so much for taking time out of your day twice this week to have
No worries.
a conversation with me. Before we get in, let's introduce to the audience a little bit about yourself
Sure.
and kind of how you got into all this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated with my master's in 2001. So been a speech language pathologist for over 20 years. I'm just going to name that. I like to keep it.
I'm not that far behind.
And yeah, I've always been really into, I knew I was a helper very early on. I knew I wanted to help people. It seemed like that was my thing. And I didn't even really know speech language pathology existed, except for my sister had a friend who was a speech language pathologist. So I had thought I wanted to be a physical therapist for a while just because I knew I wanted to do something
Right.
in the healing kind of realm. And I knew I didn't want to be a teacher because I didn't want to manage like 30 kids. That didn't feel congruent with me. But yeah, so I just went that route and decided pretty early on that, like, even before college, that I wanted to go that route, which was helpful to finish all the coursework when you kinda know. And then just had a slew of, worked in the schools and then had my own private practice out in California, and then had children. And I didn't expect that my passion for speech language pathology would start to, I don't know, wane is I don't know if it's the right word, but the kids that I was mostly working with were labeled autistic or on the spectrum. And, that's shifted in terms of the labels. Now we just say autistic individuals, but there were whatever. So I had always worked with more of the nonverbal kids that had behaviors and the really challenging cases. And I think that after having my own children and just going through my own healing journey and not knowing I had chronic Lyme disease and co-infections and whatnot, I think my energy was just tanked and taxed, and I had to start healing myself and my children due to some of those complications. And so I think my passion sort of just wasn't there because I had to go in and start healing myself and my children. And then it's still unfolding, right? That I learn all these modalities that help to heal me and my children. It was first my children that, and then I put my oxygen mask on and then
Mhm.
started. And so now I get to share all these modalities and still trying to integrate with how, to still name that I am a speech language pathologist. And I will always be that. I'll always be grateful for the profession. But just everything's unfolding and I don't have to like be like I'm no longer a speech therapist because that'll always be part of the journey. And I think, yeah, so
Yeah, I want to talk really quickly just to give the listeners context about how we met and how
yeah.
it just evolved from there. I'm a speech therapist, and I've struggled with this journey of self discovery in terms of the evolution of what it means to be a healer. So it started as like a speech therapist, and I still see clients, but I've passed, I would say, 5, 6 years. Um, 6, 7 years is when I was introduced to a healing modality called NAET, which is algae elimination technique. But the N is like, I don't want, it's like, it's an Indian last name, but it's like the person who created it.
Cool.
So they call it NAET. And it was like again, with my kids, bringing them, and it was the impact of like how that everything shifted. I was like, holy cow, that kind of like is what opened the door. But we know a doctor, we know several doctors, but Dr. John Makoff, who is Chicago based, he, I guess, is kind of like the commonality between the two, between us, besides being a speech therapist. But um, I just remember being in a hotel room on my birthday because I decided to go away for the night and just have a night to myself. And it was like in this massive like bathtub, and I was soaking in the bathtub and, going through Instagram, and while a Christmas movie was playing on the TV. And I saw that another doctor had a picture and had Dr. Matt Koff. And I clicked on him and I'm like, oh, he's Chicago based. Like, let me explore about him a little bit more. And then he had shared a picture and tagged you in it and said something like, she's an amazing speech therapist. And I'm like, wait, what? Like this healer, because by going through Dr. John's Instagram, I knew a little bit about kind of what he did. I'm like, wait a minute, a speech therapist who does some of this healing work as well. And I messaged you because I had questions about my son, who was struggling with a few things from some major surgery he had as a baby, or I
Mhm.
was viewing it as like impact from that surgery, and asked if any of your stuff could help because he has some language challenges as well. And I wanted like a speech therapist perspective who had this lens. And you had referred me back to Dr. John Matkoff, who we've done multiple sessions with him, and he's amazing.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it was so comforting to see someone else who went through this whole, like, you get your master's degree. It's very
Yeah, it's very
empirical
niche,
research
like
based, and you have
yeah.
and like I learned a lot about oral motor in graduate school, and a lot of programs didn't teach it because it wasn't empirically, there's no evidence to prove it, or
Yeah.
so there was a lot about like science and research and studies, and I'm like, but what about what feels like good,
Right.
or what like
Good.
we're able to see in a client that we can't necessarily explain through research, but we're seeing the shifts.
Mhm.
And it was just so comforting to run into another speech therapist who was like looking at that. And so that
Yeah.
relationship evolved. I I wanted to talk to you more about this because it's also helping me embody these two entities of myself, where, I always said, like, I'm a speech therapist on this platform, but on this platform I'm a healer. And 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 for me, I have to embody both pieces because it's embodying all of me.
Yes, and I'm that's the same unfolding journey for myself, and I think you just spoke about it, and, of course, I would like that if this podcast reaches somebody else and touches them that's going through this like, knowing that they have these innate healing gifts, and maybe they're a software engineer. My husband is a prime example of that. He's got a lot of gifts, and he's in big tech, and he's a software engineer, and so it's not just speech language pathologists or speech therapy, but we um we spend so much time and it's so specialized that it's really hard to pivot from our career. I mean, that could be a limiting belief that I'm talking about. I I would like to, you know, I'll explore that, but it is a challenge when you go and you all this time, the clinicals, the extra getting your graduate degree, it's very specialized, and I know you often and we actually have a broad scope that you could work in the
Oh
hospital.
my gosh, yes.
In the schools, you could mostly work with mine was mostly working with, kids on the spectrum and that have sensory issues, and you are doing the oromotor
Yeah.
and the myofunctional therapy, like, there are so many, so, again, I think we resonated so much because we're like, "Ah, there's another person that d" so we don't feel so alone,
Mhm,
like,
mhm.
journey and yeah, so it's still unfolding and I'm, learning that if I don't embody all of it, it's kind of an insult to my soul.
Right, right. It's you're hiding a piece of you, of yourself.
Yes, and I'm all about authenticity, that was, like, my big word, and now my word was, like, alignment, and now it's passion. I'm just gonna
Mhm,
go for it, like, I'm
mhm.
going for it.
I love that. Um, you said that, you put like you learned your gifts kind of through the journey with your children and the unfolding of all that. Um, and I think you've also have incorporated some energy work in your speech therapy practice in the
Mhm.
past.
Yeah, I have. I think that the word is empathy. When you work with nonverbal quote unquote nonverbal because there's always communication. The body language is telling a story. There's all these, but I predominantly worked with these challenging individuals, and I think my gift has always been the empathy, or people feel safe in my presence. So, I'll be the stranger that tells me their life story, or
Mhm.
people that just come up and just want to be around you, and like, so a lot of times I already knew that I had some kind of a gift, and I didn't even understand it at the time, because I would often compare myself to other speech language pathologists that were doing more behavior-based stuff, and I would just go in and play with the kids. And
Mhm.
I wasn't taking a bunch of data, but I know there are some people that that's important to take all the data and prove, like, these outcomes. And I have a different energy where I just come in and I meet the individual kind of where they're at and create a safe space. And that it's always been my
Same.
modality. And people would be like, I don't know what you're doing, Jen, but like, they only do this stuff for you. They talk when you're around, or they like make approximations if we're talking about. And I'm like, and I never quite understood it, but I did start to get into energy work just like by my observations of these kids that had such a clear connection to, some of the unseen things, and I'm like, "Wow," like, they might not, but they're so tuned into, like, another frequency that feels like it's more of a direct line to creator, and so I started to get curious about that, and had, done some dabbling with, that's how I think I got the first book I got, which is ironic because I think people will think in our profession, it's a little out there, was like indigo children and
Oh,
these sensitive, and I was like, "Okay, I work with these kids. They feel like the energy is like they are not of this world." Like, however, they have a really unique but kind of high vibrational frequency to me. I'm like, "Wow." And so I've always been this bridge to kind of like a groundedness, but also like that metaphysical stuff. So I got my Reiki. I was doing some movements it's called longevity energetics, but it's most likely like qigong, kind of like tai chi movements. And so I was doing that and going to different healers in LA, and doing some self work. And it just started to just unfold for me that way. I don't know if you have a similar journey with how you discovered like your different modalities, but
yeah. Yeah. Well, I resonate, and we talked about this before where, and I shared this example with you before, but like I've also worked with children on the autism spectrum. And I remember one particular summer, I was doing half days at this autism school.
mhm,
And these were children who, some of them had one-on-one aids. Some of them could be very aggressive, and you never really knew what would be a trigger for them.
mhm,
And here I was, like I think a couple years out of graduate school, maybe. I mean, I was very, very new, and I was put into not put in, but like this was a contract that I had. And
mhm.
I remember the speech therapist saying, like, okay, they had to like move these tables a certain way to like in
It's
case this child, so it was a protection for the therapist. So if the child were to
right.
lash out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And
Yeah.
so we had a session. He was the sweetest. Like he looked like he was the sweetest. And they said like you just don't know when he's going to turn. And he was the sweetest, gentlest, cutest, adorable boy. And I remember his session was ending, so his aide came back to get him and was walking away, and he broke away from from the aide and ran to me, and I was bracing myself, and he ran to me to give me a hug.
Yep, yep, that's
And the other therapists were like, he's never done this. Like,
mhm.
and because they set up the context of what he
Yeah,
was going to,
you had an well,
I,
a lot of times we do that,
right.
there's that therapy lens that,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's probably some validity because they'd seen behaviors.
Right.
However, you had yeah, you could
Yeah.
read the energy that,
Right.
you know
And
yeah,
I've been able to connect with kids kind of similar. Like I've had clients who've switched practitioners because of the way that I was
mhm.
able to get a child to communicate or whatever goals that the family.
Yes,
But I
yes.
think for me, I've always had this desire to help,
Yeah.
which is, why I went into the speech therapy world. But I just remember just knowing, I think it was like 5 years ago, like I was 38 or 39 at the time. And I just remember feeling there was like something shifting within me. And I remember telling people, like, I don't know what it is, but I feel
Mhm.
very different. Like things aren't bothering me like they did before. I feel like there's something more beyond what I'm doing. And it was just a
Mhm.
level of curiosity, but like just a shift. And it was through working with other healers. In fact, I had a psychic reading
Mhm.
like 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. It was all around this whole time, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and it was someone who she was vetted, like she was, you know, I friends of mine knew her and had known her for a while. And I get on a call with her, and right away it was like, "Hey, how are you? Good, good. Wait, you're a healer?" That's exactly what she said. She's like, "You're a healer?" And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, no, you do know. You are a healer. And I'm like, well, I have these like certain gifts that I have. I don't know how to make sense of it. And I feel like the shift
Mhm.
that's happening within me. And that was the call that kind of gave me permission to explore a little bit more. But it was around that time during like NAET treatments that myself and my kids were having,
Mhm.
Reiki sessions that I was getting, working with other
Yeah.
healers. It was the same message of there's you're meant to do more, like you're, and so it was, I was able to tap into that and explore more. And then I got trained in Reiki, um,
Mhm.
and then I just fell in love with the whole idea of there's something bigger than us.
Yes.
There's the whole, I'm fascinated by the whole epigenetics, which we know about speech
Yes.
therapy anyways, but epigenetics and generational trauma and imprinting and karmic contracts,
Mhm.
and plus also the subconscious mind, which taps into the science and the psychology that I like about with
Yes.
therapy. So it
Yes,
just
because
kind
that
of,
that is so
yeah,
yeah, and so my kids, um so my kids and having they had I was introduced to chiropractic because, I had twins, the twin pregnancy, and they were full term, and because of how, my firstborn and my age, I was always considered the geriatric pregnant. I didn't meet my husband till later in life, so I always laugh because they call you, like, you're an old timer if you're 35 and over.
right.
So I was an old timer, well, labeled geriatric pregnancy. So my firstborn was a cesarean, and then they wouldn't let me have twins. I mean, okay, I didn't know enough. I knew what I knew at the time. I could have pushed it probably to try to have, and there's so many benefits to having, um, I had to do a lot of work around, that because as kids are pulled out of, if you actually watch a video of a cesarean, like the doctors cannot drop that baby. So sometimes when they're pulling by that neck, there can be like a vagus nerve injury at that atlas and that C1, C2. So I didn't, of course, this is all hindsight knowledge now, but um, Liam came out and he just like, that they one pediatrician thought he was just strong, but he couldn't like differentiate his movement with his neck to do any of the the rotating
Was he tongue
reflex.
tied?
He's tongue-tied, yes. Both of all of my kids are tongue-tied. And that's also a correlation to some methylation detoxation. I mean, it's not causation, I'm not saying that, but we have the MTHFR gene mutation, and, there's a lot of midline stuff and detox pathways, yada, yada, yada. Now I know. But it was like my kids had the perfect storm of things that now I know.
Mm.
Um, I didn't know at the time that I had Lyme disease and co-infections. I grew up in Illinois, and played soccer and did camping and whatnot, and probably just got that season, like a summer flu that was really a tick bite, but I never got the bullseye. So there was no, like, you don't always get the bullseye. And I
Right.
didn't know that you pass on when you're talking about genetic traumas and things, and where we'll get into that, but you also pass on your gut biome
Yeah.
and your parasites and your toxicity to your children, whether that's toxic patterns and unresolved stress, or that's trauma, beliefs, or actually physical toxins and tick-borne illnesses. So I didn't know that, and I had passed that on to the twins. So they're already, and also my daughter Chloe it's a rare disease day. I just looked or something, and she has something really rare too, that is like a big port wine stain birthmark, which we can talk about past lives. Like I think she's been burned in a past life, and now her like the cellular memory of that like almost manifested in this perfect toxicity of a storm kind of thing, because I was going through immense grief. I had lost my dad just before she was born. So we can chat about that, but my whole journey has been first to heal my kids, and I found chiropractic early on because of colic, like bad colic, and then a reaction to their 4-month shots
Mhm.
where they were like vomiting and high fever and like none of how they were behaving. I was like so scared they were going to die that night, like after they got their and I don't want to talk too much about that because it's a very controversial topic, but it is part of our journey, and it's kind of how we found um, chiropractic and these amazing healers. And it's also how I found Neuro Emotional Technique that really deals with these unresolved stress patterns, like emotions that get stored in your tissues. And then how I found Theta Healing work and belief work, and meeting Dr. Makoff, and he was doing some really cool stuff with like the Akashic records and past. I'm like, where did you learn that? And he's like, oh, I learned it through this class. And then I'm like, oh, well, I need to take that class. And then, so it's just this whole evolution. And then we meet, and I
Yeah.
just love how as we raise our vibrational frequency, it's all resonance. And then we start attracting the
People.
people. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I love, gosh, there were so many like pivots I can take in that like 2 minutes that we were just talking. I'm like, oh, I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about that. But um, I, it's so fascinating like how physical manifestations can happen from
Mhm.
genetic imprints or emotional trauma or whatever. I want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about the whole, to hear your perspective a little bit more on generational trauma and unhealed wounds and how it manifests. And I
Mhm.
find it fascinating that, and you had did a TikTok on it, which by the way,
Oh,
when
yeah.
you share a TikTok video on Instagram, it doesn't share the whole clip. It only does like
I
15
know. I have to figure that out. You are more of a genius with the social media stuff. I'm
seconds.
still learning.
I'm
I'll
so
probably
about to. I won't do TikTok. I don't. I'm like I can't.
at least I'm not like doing what like our parents' generation where they like write a status update like they're writing to somebody. I'm
Yeah,
not that bad.
yeah.
So, no.
But but there was one time we were talking about, okay, so a little of the sciencey speech therapy part coming in. You
Yeah.
had a so
Major.
basically the tongue is from a like a dental facial growth and a whole physiological perspective. The tongue is supposed to rest along the palate. And that
Mhm.
helps as a baby, as a child, that helps to shape the palate. The roof of your mouth is the floor of your nose. So if you have
Yes.
a narrow palate, you have a narrow nasal airway space. Um,
Mhm.
Nasal breathing is what sets us up for efficient breathing, good, healthy brain
Mhm.
cells, whole body physiology. Mouth breathing has a host of other issues.
Yes.
So, if the tongue is not resting, then you're more likely to do mouth breathing and can impact sleep. And so, for you, your sleep was impacted. You had a tongue tie and a narrow palate, and you did something that was very brave.
Yes.
You
No.
went ahead and got a dome put in,
Mhm.
which is basically, why don't you explain what
It's
that
kinda
is?
yeah, it's just the name of the device that the people that created, but it's like SARPy if you were to put in, it's just a rapid expander for adults. However, instead of, in children, which my children now I know better, do better, right? I know more, so now I can prevent the stuff um, in children, before that palatal suture line is closed, which you would probably know better. I was told like 10 to 12, or I don't know if it's
Well, I
later. It
think
probably
point
depends.
out arrows. I think like you can still do some stuff between 12 and 13, but
13.
right now, and it depends on who you're talking to, but in the world of myofunctional therapy and orthotropics,
Mhm.
is I mean, they're doing palatal expansion on 3 and 4 year olds.
Yes, I saw that you have I'm now I'm like my Cassidy definitely has an overbite, and like you can because of her tongue tie, her lower jaw got recedes and there's a big overbite. So anyways, I normally you can get a removable palatal or well,
Yes, for
not
stretches, usually removable or cement.
or cemented in. My daughter's is cemented in, both of my daughters. However, it's attached to their molars.
Yeah,
And that's how it's expanding because that palatal suture line is still open. And the
it's
body's
horrible.
so amazing because you just like expand and then all those bone fibers grow. And I'm like, wow, the body is so
It is
cool. Oh my gosh.
and
And
speech errors go away sometimes on their
oh,
own.
I know, like, even after my daughter received her tongue tie release for posterior tie, her twin brother's name is Liam,
She can say
and
it.
she's been in speech therapy for years, like, since she was 2, and all of a sudden, even with her swelling after the
Yeah.
procedure, she was like, "Liam," and she, like, got so excited, and I'm like, "Oh, man." My mama heart was like, because I am a speech language
Yeah.
pathologist, I felt like I should have known better, but
They
they
don't
didn't teach this. They
they
don't
don't
teach this. And this is like a newer movement.
yeah.
Well, maybe not newer because I know read that midwives back in the day used to have longer
Mhm.
pinky fingertips to kind of just do it right at birth for
Mhm.
breastfeeding, right?
Well, I mean, there could be arguments of like if do they do stretches and where
Yeah, I know.
post wound care and everything, but there's a lot of changes that have happened over the past 100 years or so. I mean, even like 300-400 years if you look at
Yeah,
different anthropological dentists that look
right.
at the shrinking of the skulls and the heads.
Yeah.
But
But but yeah, but
podcast, but
my whole thing is that I had to have, I didn't have to have, I elected to have this surgery because of I have been going to chiropractor, craniosacral therapists, myofascial, like I've been doing everything and things didn't improve for me because I had gotten my tongue tie release and I had a lot of amazing shifts with my posture because that little flap
mhm,
it affects so much,
it does.
and
Yeah.
I had a lot of less tension, but what was happening for me because my airway was restriction was more in my nasal cavity, and so this is why this expands. I have 4 titanium screws in this dome device, and so instead of expanding at the molars pushing out, it I had to have a surgeon go in and,
Attach it to the bone.
cut attach the screws to the bone, but also open up, like,
Yeah.
chisel that palatal suture line open, and it was wild because it was so fast. I did, like, 42 cranks of a wrench. It was like a literal little tiny wrench, and as you know, I have, like, a bigger than ever well, Madonna doesn't have a gap anymore, so her telltale gap, it's gone, but, I don't recognize Madonna, but back in the day when
Yeah.
Madonna had that telltale
Yes.
gap or all these celebrity Woody Harrelson,
Yeah.
um, I had that plus more. I got and
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't elect to have that surgery because of the gap.
Mhm.
And now I have, as of February 6th, my braces back on, but the whole journey of the somatic experience and the beliefs I had, and also historically, my dad snored so bad, and
Well, talk
he
about the dream that you had either the day before the
yeah.
surgery.
So I have and you're better if and of course, if you go to any of my social media pages, especially my TikTok, I've made quite a few TikToks about my journey with the jaw surgery because and I have like my teeth are crowded and they tilt inward
Mhm,
because there was just no where like my tongue was tied down
mhm,
and that's just there was like this void where there was nowhere to it just grew without a foundation. So basically, my dad looked, if I look at pictures, we have the similar teeth. He snored. I know I snored more, like less than my dad did. Like he went to sleep studies. He had the
mm.
CPAP machine. I knew that I could go the CPAP route, but that wouldn't address my root cause.
No, it wouldn't. It
And
was Band-Aid.
it was a Band-Aid solution, and I'm all about root cause. Let's get to the root. So, so basically, I the night I had done all this work and had all these awarenesses with through cranial sacral therapy, which my lady's also this energy healer that has these extra gifts, right? You meet all these special people with their unique gifts from that are uniquely theirs. And she was noticing that my left side was more impacted than my right, and I was expanding beautifully on the right, which is like moving into the future, and
Mm,
it's your masculine side, and I've always I was a tomboy growing up and always more comfortable with my masculine side. And I had my own business. So I almost had to run more masculine energy. You had to do. And the feminine side is that more of that intuitive, nurturing, receptive, like just being and not doing.
Mhm.
And so I noticed that I historically have so much constriction on my left side, and there were some beliefs around, it being safe to be a woman,
Mm.
and there I had done some work that this wasn't just this lifetime. I didn't
Right,
come in maybe with a and then there was a lot of, "Is it even safe to be me?"
right.
Like, can I actually take up space? And that was a big thing for me. And I know that it's actually a worthiness of existing. Like, I know, like, taking up space. Like, I would over apologize. I'm sorry. And people would be like, why are you saying I'm sorry, Jen? And I'm like, I don't know. This is so weird.
I love that you just said taking up space because you literally gave yourself more space. Like
I
from a
know.
structural standpoint, you gave yourself space.
And
And
it's
yeah,
been life changing. People are like, your face has changed, Jen. You look different. Your voice sounds different. You
yeah.
sound more like you.
Oh,
And and that's been and so my dad, um, he visited I'm like, "You can't make this timing up." And he visited I hadn't had a dad dream in so long, and, the night of my surgery, I saw him and he was like it was, like, so real, like, I had gone down and it was my house, like, I'd gone down and usually when I have dreams, like, it but it was and he was sitting on the couch, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, dad," and he like and he didn't say anything, and he looked happy and proud, and he just gave me a hug, and it was like, "Thank you."
oh,
And it felt like that message or how I interpreted was like I addressed something that was super in our lineage
yes.
and that he was like, "You're doing the work, kid.
Mhm,
Like, thank you, like, where your ancestors are
mhm,
cheering you on."
mhm.
Like, and that they're getting a healing, and then the kids are getting like, grandchildren are getting a healing. It was just a beautiful, like, so pure, felt like pure love and like
Mhm,
the
mhm.
dream. And I
Right.
was like, "I got this." I'm like, "Dad, I got this for the surgery because there was some nervousness there about going under and yeah.
Course, of course. And I think sometimes I find this to be true about myself, and then talking to other people who are very awake and aware of ending the traumas that's been on their lineage for ever how many years, that it's almost like you become this brick wall and everything runs up against you. So like you
Mhm.
experience like so much more, there's so much more work to do, there's so much more limiting beliefs that you're now having to dig under. It's almost like everything is like coming up against you
And
because
it's
you're
like
now
layers. Yeah.
it's like hitting you. It's like you're the brick wall, you're ending it, it's not going to go any further. So it's almost like these cars are like crashing into you because
Yeah.
you say no. And yeah, I a couple of years ago, I was introduced to this healer, and she said, in order for me to tell you what I do, I kind of have to show you what I do. So she's like, I'd love to
Mhm.
offer you a complimentary session. And
Mhm.
I actually want to have her on my podcast because it was life changing. And so
Yes.
I got on the session and we were chit chatting, and she's like, I'm hearing you often say the words that you're not supported. And I'm like I kept saying, like, I just
Mhm.
feel supported,
Yeah.
yeah,
You can hear people's,
yeah,
underlying beliefs or bottom beliefs just by
right. But
listening.
I think I was
Yeah.
literally saying those words. And she's like, let's
Patterns.
figure out the origin of this, or let's like look back at
Yeah.
it. And what I had to do was picture myself. I want to say, I think we had to do a few things to get to this point, but eventually it was visualizing like myself at 1 month, 2 month, or like 12, 11, all months,
Mhm.
all the way down to in utero.
Yeah, like a
And
timeline.
yep.
Yeah.
And it was like, where did this I'm not supportive begin? And it was in utero.
Mhm.
And so we were able to kind of work along that. So it was like a belief that, again, inherited generational DNA,
Yes.
imprint. And then I had a healing session with you, a theta healing session, and we took it even further to like, I don't know, 400 or 500 years ago, where
Right, right. I use, I combine, like, theta healing, which you can do this without muscle testing, but because of being around all the chiropractic community and it's part of Neuro Emotional Technique, the muscle testing for origin or origination of time, but I find that it's, helpful to know that this has been
Yeah.
because sometimes we don't understand why we are the way we are, and
Right.
then when you can name that you've been operating this belief for this many lifetimes,
Yeah.
this long ago, and then you get what's the beauty in is that what your healer it sounds like she was doing that, and Theta does that method is that you get to resolve it.
Mhm.
And that is
Yeah.
always the
Yeah.
message is that nothing I feel like anything is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially
Yeah.
when you do that inner work and you clear the subconscious and, yeah, you
Yes.
reprogram. Um,
Yeah.
let's talk about, beliefs and entities and how they can impact our belief, and we'll go into
Yeah.
linking into what happened yesterday, but let's
Sure.
start off with, like, these beliefs how that we have that could either be beliefs, and I may not be describing this in the right way, but this is how I'm processing it. Beliefs that are projected onto us from an entity,
Mhm.
or we have low vibe beliefs, low vibe frequency that opens us up
Up
to
for
attracting entities.
yeah, do you know, Power versus Force, Dr. Stephen Hawkins'
No.
work?
Mm-mm.
He, like, is a psychiatrist, but I have this chart, and it's like everything has a frequency. A hertz, like it's
Yeah.
cycles per seconds. Like our thoughts have energy, like this wall, like everything has a frequency. And but if you look at some of the low vibrational frequencies, it's shame, it's guilt, but their life you could be like evil, miserable. So if you have a lot of people do have shame, and guilt, and religious programming. I know I grew up Catholic, and this is not bashing Catholics or religion. This is just naming my journey that there's a lot of guilt that's
Mhm.
just instilled in religious programming. So I'm going to say that um, some viruses and parasites also vibrate at a similar frequency. And so I kind of look at it as foreign energy. Anything that's not us
Mhm.
can impact or and I actually was in meditation before talking about this. I said, God, God, creator of all that is, like, download what it means to be like an entity, how to
Mhm.
describe it best. And, um, you know, and I got the message of ex- explain it from your perspective, Jen. Like you have a unique lens about it. So I kept being okay. So I'll give myself as an example. I when I was 17, and this goes around with my beliefs. I had a belief that, I was this weirdo that never fit in. I never belong. I don't belong. If I were to test it, I belong, and I test it differently in a yes or no because the subconscious does mind doesn't understand double negatives. So if I were to say I I belong, I would get a no, or my body would be like, no. That was before. But I always was trying to fit in and negating my intuition just to fit in. So I was at a party, and they were doing they had put this paper on your tongue. I didn't even ask any questions, which still blows my mind because that was so not me. And I could have already had something attached to me that was like, yeah, this is a great idea. Put this on your tongue. You'll fit into this, because it was hard for me to have a boundary and say no.
Yeah.
So that's also part of my beliefs. These people pleaser patterns that
Mm.
are in my lineage. Like if you were to, so I had done some drugs and like psychedelic drugs that opened me up like a portal for a lot of foreign energy, a lot of entities, a lot of darkness. I had hallucinations and a psychosis. They called it a drug induced psychosis. So I
From
kind
that
of
time.
from that time, they didn't understand, and they also didn't understand how they didn't a lot of the doctors and psychiatrists didn't believe that I only dropped acid once because of the way I was presenting was like like somebody who had dropped acid like 100 times.
Wow.
And so they weren't sure, okay, is this schizophrenia? Da, da, da. So it wasn't. It was a lot of entities in my space
Mhm.
and, like, telling me you should just kill yourself, like, "You're no good, like, there's no hope for you." So I think because it was such low vibe stuff and I was so far out of my body, so this is why I have this unique gift to sense those attachments that are dysregulating your people's nervous system. It's the metaphysical stuff can impact because we have our physical bodies, but we have a holographic body or aura, and then we have these energy centers. And I'm not going to go too deep into that. It could be a whole nother podcast. But I will say that anytime I had a belief of I must suffer to be close to God.
Mm,
And this suffering or punishment and also feeling like I'll just take everybody's stuff on or transmute it, having that empathy,
mhm.
I, kinda just that was my superpower is, like, I'll take on your suffering. It's like that shaman,
Yeah,
like, "I'll take on your suffering for you because I don't want you to suffer." And
yeah,
so it was, I was like a vibrational, magnet for these entities, and especially because of the drugs that
yeah. I can totally relate to that, that almost like need to heal people so you'll take it on for them so they don't
yes.
experience it. I tend to be what I was told is I'm a quarter. I will cord into people and
Mm,
I don't take the cord away. I just like leave it there. And I had a Reiki practitioner say to me, she's like, it's almost like you're sending a part of yourself to some child in China. And
mhm.
you just and and she's like, it takes a lot. Like you are so powerful. You have such, and this could be the manifesting generator side, which I didn't know at the
Yeah,
time. But
yeah.
she's like, you are so powerful that you can actually do a lot and go and go and go and go before you actually hit a wall, but then you hit a wall.
Mhm,
And so I realize that I am a quarter and sometimes I don't recognize I'm doing it because I'm just so used to doing it, but also I have such an immense threshold.
mhm.
And so I've had to learn to protect my energy. And I've had like energy worker after and like so many
Yeah,
tell me like you need to protect your energy. You need to protect your energy. And I'm like, I know, I know, I know. So but
yeah,
yeah, it's like it's I feel like a lot of healers can relate to this take need to take suffering away from other people.
right, and it's an allowing belief on some level that we allow perhaps that toxic person to court into us, and we are like, "Okay," or we allow some sort of a low vibrational frequency. I mean, I think anybody, even if you're not in the metaphysical world or a healer, you can walk in a room and be like, wow, that room has bad vibes.
Totally, totally.
We talk about the evil eye is translated in almost every language. There's like, you know, there's just a lot of metaphysical phenomenon that we talk about, but maybe we don't understand it per se, and I just think that we might call in an entity because we don't have a boundary, and so it could come in on anger or fear that
Mhm.
those lower like, everything like anger, fear is under, 200 hertz. It's like a 75, a very low vibrational frequency, and so our emotions unresolved can be the portal for, like, somebody courting in. I look at people who court in that could be called it's just direction, energy vampires or energy being spewed at you. You're getting whacked or it's an attack. It's coming at you. And so I deal with getting curious as to why we're letting this in. Because anytime we talk about in trauma work that your triggers are your blessings, well,
Right.
so are these metaphysical attachments. Like
Yeah.
they can, if you reshape it, bring awareness. And I think that's what God Creator was wanting me to say is that, like, the sabotage thing, like, we were recording yesterday, and we had some beautiful
Oh my god.
moments, and there was a flow and a canter, and then we got to the end, and, it was like, "Oh my gosh, it didn't record,"
And
and
but even before that, it was I usually for definitely for podcasts, I will hardwire into the internet and not rely on my Wi-Fi. And usually it's just a switch. I just press something and
yeah.
there's no interruption to the flow. Well, there was a major interruption, and then you were
Mm.
pulling an entity. And as you were pulling it,
Oh, you came back online. It was like, you can't make this stuff up, and a lot of times I'll do this work with my clients online, and I'll like, again, our external world is always giving us, clues as to what's going on in our internal because we're co-creating a reality.
right,
So our thoughts are creating our reality, those beliefs, those underlying beliefs. So a lot of healers have this persecution energy, like they've been persecuted and quite honestly maybe killed for some of their gifts in past lives. and so they don't fully embody their gifts in this lifetime
Sure.
because that is still in their DNA. It's on
Yeah.
that past life, historic, or even in their lineage. Maybe they had, I know my mom is super intuitive, and like there's like these gifts on my maternal side that, and so, you know, all of it matters. We don't exactly
Yeah.
come in with a clean slate.
No, we don't. We don't. I mean, like the upbringing helps shape that identity, but it's almost like we come in our soul knows what we're coming into. And it's almost like you
Mhm.
have like this checklist. Okay, you're going to come into this. This is the belief that you're going to have. And it's going to be shaped by this. And you're going to probably have this experience, which is going to wake you up. And then, and depending on, they say like if it's a belief that, and I believe this, they say if it's a belief that, or a lesson rather, that isn't healed, that lesson gets
Mhm.
passed down to the next
Mhm.
generation. And every lifetime that you're having to play that lesson out, it gets harder and harder to
Mhm.
like
Until
almost
you to, like, wake you up,
wake
like,
up.
big time.
Yeah.
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 Let's circle back to, because I found this fascinating. Let's circle back to the entity around technology and
Oh,
you
yeah.
said it was like a gremlin type energy entity.
Yeah. So I can't take credit for this work. This is, Dr. Randall Roberts is a chiropractic, by nature. Like,
Mhm.
however, that vibrational frequency kept, like, attracting these people with these metaphysical attachments over his 30, 40 years, and he's an applied kinesiology, guy, so he does a lot of the muscle testing using the body as an instrument to index for, um, an incongruence or a disruption and that sort of thing. So he has this manual, I have these charts, and what's funny is that, or ironic is, often, I think, like, Star Trek, my husband's a big, nerd. He loves Star Wars, Trek, all the comics, like, although, like, ironically, I'm now interested in them because of these metaphysical things are named in some of these,
Yeah.
like, the reptilian these races of entities. Well, I like, there's 5 common ones, and some of the most common metaphysical things is, number 1, energy vampire. You have somebody's corded into you and sucking the vital life force. Number 2 is you're getting attacked, and that's why we have a lot of autoimmune stuff at the throat. People attack a lot at the throat,
Mhm.
like, whatever you said, if you trigger them, they're like, "Ugh," and if we accept, we always have a choice to accept it and allow it in or not. It's always gonna be there. And then we have the entities and ghosts, gremlins. Gremlins are in the movie Gremlins, I grew up
Yeah.
in that era. They kinda energetically, just for me, I don't necessarily see a gremlin that I'm pulling. I feel the energy because I'm more of that's my gift. I'm more of a feeler. But I
Mhm.
think like, he has the gift of sight, the clear, voyance, so he sees it as, like, this ugly creature. I feel this ugly creature as I'm sending things to the light and pulling up, but I always have to understand why the person let them in, because let something attach to them, because that's how it truly clears,
It's
and you
almost like there's again that awareness piece, like you are attracting that. Why are you attracting that? Let's get to the root
Mhm.
of that.
Let's get to the root of that so that you can strengthen your
Am I
biofield.
attracting technical issues, Jen?
Yeah, I was like, and when I was, like, tuning into the energy, and sometimes it could just literally not be totally a you thing. It could be because of, we're talking about
Mhm.
this, and I know that, so gremlins, like to mess with mechanical stuff, like, and that's why when people have accidents or falls, and, like, mechanical, whether that's your body mechanics or we're expressing ourselves in our
Mhm.
unique frequency on a podcast. And so, and you don't shy away. Like, I've had other people that know I do this kind of work, and that's are my gifts. They're like, "Jen, let's not talk about the
Oh,
entities because that scares people." And
yeah.
you, Karen, are like, "Jen, I want to talk about those
Let's talk about it.
entities." And
Yeah.
I love that you asked me, because I know that my gift is to demystify this, because they're all around us. So
Yeah.
you see now everybody's doing these medicinal journeys, which is great. However, if you're not fully embodying in your body and you have these
Mhm.
faulty beliefs, you could really feel messed up after one of those. And I
Well,
have been, or marijuana. There's nothing, I'm not shaming marijuana. It comes from the earth, but the THC, there's a specific entity that loves, like, um they're called archons. That's at least what Dr. Rand, and you can actually research this. There's some stuff out there about archons, and they're like mind parasites. Those irrational thoughts where you're like, "Is that even me? Like, I can't even believe I had that dark thought." You probably have an entity attached to you. And
Interesting.
so, like, that's how I feel like they get in there and, like, really mess with the beliefs, and that's why we see, like, these I think there's attachments that are there, and from my own journey that with like, where I had suicidal
Mhm.
thoughts when I had taken all those drugs and had all those entities in me, and that's why I'm so good at, like, I probably had every kind in me. And I was like and so I never quite understood that, but I'm, like, using my, suffering as now the gift to give to
Mhm.
others. I'm like, "Wow, I'm really good at this." Do I wanna be the speech language pathologist slash demon slayer label? No, but I'm getting more congruent that these are just, like, things I know and can feel and sense, and, and a lot of those kids that I did work with had attachments now in hindsight.
Right.
The
You know,
the those irrational behaviors, when you see those big mood shifts,
yeah.
that's like an attachment that's really messing with your
Mhm.
psyche, your nervous system. We talk about fight or flight and, being, regulated.
Mhm.
So, we have a lot of dysregulated individuals, and then it's almost like and there's such these open, and they're not fully in their bodies, so there anytime you're not fully in your body, whether you're using alcohol, drugs, coffee, nicotine, going to in crowds through cords, like being there's sneaky ways things get attached to us.
And to clarify, you can still drink alcohol and smoke pot if you want to, but it's just wise to protect yourself beforehand, like, just
It
so that
is just wise to
yeah.
ground and set an intention, and then if you notice that you feel off, it's super easy to just have I'm watching this guy on Instagram who does all these tai chi movements, and just, like, your intention of just your intention alone removes things, and just having the awareness. That was what God when I asked God what he wanted me to talk about, like, "Creator, what do you want me to say about entities?" Is that good or bad? It's like, that you get to decide that through your
Right,
beliefs, but
right.
it's just the awareness that's key.
One of the
That
things that when I was, like, in this "oh shit" moment yesterday where I'm like, "Jen, we spent an hour and I didn't
Mhm,
press record." One of the things you said was like, "You know what? There's a reason why it didn't happen. Clear maybe we weren't supposed to talk about certain things, or maybe there's an awareness." And what I noticed afterwards was you became more transparent on Instagram. You
mhm.
went ahead and reignited this other Instagram page that you have that speaks to your
Yeah.
skills, and you like,
Yes.
and I think you even said it. You're like, I'm like, I don't know exactly your words you said, but something like, I'm not shying away from this anymore. Like, this is who I like, that kind of embodiment. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah, but
interesting.
see, like, had we not done that, like, you gave me permission
Oh,
because you named it on your story that that happened, and
yeah,
you're like, "We'll probably talk about it," and then also you just being you and being like, "Jen, talk to me about these entities."
yeah,
I'm like, because 'cause I've had other people tell me not to talk about them.
yeah. No,
So,
I,
that was a gift for me alone because and then I also opened up a letter from a client who, mailed me a check because she's pretty old. She doesn't do all
yeah,
the Zelle and the PayPal and all
yeah,
that, and I'm
yeah,
like, "Yeah, that's fine." So she wrote me a letter, and she had a really gnarly attachment that actually had been from another lifetime. She's
yeah,
carried this attachment, like, that I don't for lack of a better word, I'm just gonna call it, it was, like, demonic. It was
yeah.
very, dark, and she would wake up with scratches on her, and I'm not gonna, go into too much, but, like, that is a phenomenon that happens with, some really gnarly attachments, and we've watched movies about this, right? I mean, like,
Right.
I always I'm like, even when I watch these horror movies, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that is real because I also had
I can't do her.
I had almost gone through a personal hell with, all the attachments I had, and I
Mhm.
had to, like, really fight for my light, and so I had to fight and go into the depths of my shadow. So the shadowy stuff doesn't, scare me. I think there's a gift in those in exploring the you can't have light without the darkness.
No,
It's just quantumly not possible.
right,
So,
right.
like the yin and the yang like, so the more neutral we can approach it, and I think that's what I love about how you asked me about it. It was very
Oh,
neutral.
yeah.
It was very like, "Jen, tell me more about
It's
this."
really come from a place of curiosity of like, I want to know more about this. And what I said yesterday, I have a son who's also very gifted. And
Mhm.
I know through Dr. John Makoff, who's done some Akashic records with him, um, is that he in previous lifetimes, came into the world and his journey was to honor his gift and he didn't. And he felt, and the essence of it was he just didn't feel supported by his family to really lean in there. And so
Mhm.
he didn't. And I think it was like at least two lifetimes that he didn't do it. So his journey in this lifetime is to really honor this gift. And I I think it's so amazing that I'm going through my own journey while he's going through it as well. So I
Yes.
want to be able to understand it. But like from the whole like saying about how like I don't like watching horror movies or anything like that, or anything of
Yeah,
like
that
the
kind of
darkness, right? And he can watch any not any, and he's probably watched about 90% of them, but like any Marvel movie with,
yeah.
especially
I
Thor.
love the Doctor Strange stuff and the
Yeah. Well,
portal,
and
yeah.
the latest Doctor Strange one was very, I felt demonic with,
Yeah, I haven't yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. And even like,
I fell asleep, which is so funny, I fell asleep during that movie, which I didn't wanna take it all in.
that's funny. Or even like the latest Thor movie, it was like about this evil entity or whatever he was pulling shadows off the wall, and the shadows would kidnap the kids. And so I would
Mm,
not let him have that or the other Doctor Strange one, but he's pretty like Thor is pretty bloody and he'll watch like bloody, stuff like that from a Marvel and it doesn't bother him. He's standing up at the TV and he's like pretending to be the superhero. But
yeah.
you put Harry Potter on and you talk about like
Mhm.
in the first Harry Potter
Mhm.
movie, Voldemort is like basically possessed one of the teachers, and you can see that on the back of the
Mhm.
teacher's head. It freaks him out. Or like the voice of Voldemort coming through the walls. And
Mhm.
he can't handle it. And every time he's tried so many times to watch it
I
and then he'll
can't.
go to bed and he can't, he's scared. And so
Right.
I'm like, isn't that interesting? And my husband was like, dude, you watch Thor, you watch this. And I'm like, it's different. And I think
Well,
because
and that's
he's so
like, it could be a
disconnected.
past yeah, it sounds like it could be I I'm learning with my own clients, and I think how I view the healings and the vibrational frequency is I'll get like 4 people in 1 week that have a similar like, I'm like, "Okay, God, clearly, like, I can handle this because, the limbic resonance, they're feeling safe to explore this." And a lot of the past life work is super powerful because not your son may not understand, but he might have been possessed by something not of him from a past life, and he remembers that it has a
Mhm,
similar energy or vibration or frequency,
mhm,
and that's kinda how, indexing for time and finding the root, like, so sometimes the belief is on a past life and naming what the
mhm,
past life is, however and I always go directly to God, source, creator, whatever your word is, if you want to use Jesus, it's just something higher than me, my higher self. So,
mhm.
and then command the truth. Like I co-create, show me the truth. Like I
Right.
often say, show me the truth. And it's not that I'm so interested in this elaborate past life story. I'm interested in the why.
Mm,
And so usually God, creator, or I'm being perceiving genesis of witnessing the reason why what's holding them back in this lifetime. And I feel like that's the deep work.
right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This has been amazing.
Yes.
I can go for like another hour
No,
talking about
I
this.
know.
But let's wrap things up with, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about what you do?
Yeah.
I'll put everything in the show notes as well.
Right. So you can come. I have a lot of the. We talked a lot about my journey with the expansion, and that's like on TikTok. It's SLP Gen Mom. And then I have on Instagram, which you said you inspired me to resurrect something, and it's called Heart Rooted Healing. And then I also have a more personal Instagram page, but I'm pretty transparent and authentic, and that's kind of what I'm embodying these days. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but is is Jen_McNerney_healer. So,
Then I guess,
uh,
if they wanna learn more about what you do, then your
oh yeah,
therapeutic healing might be the better
which
Instagram
one?
page to follow. The is it Heart Rate?
Yeah, I'm gonna start posting more about like what I do and the Neuro Emotional Technique. And if you wanna that is netmindbody.com is where you can read all about that modality, and, I think that's just a really neat technique. We didn't go too far into it, but it was related because it gets to the root of beliefs in this lifetime, and sometimes in past lives, people will
Right.
index for time there or in the womb. So,
Well, it's been amazing. Like, I could go
yeah, thank
on.
you.
Maybe we'll have a part 2 at some point, but thank you again for your
Thank
patience with all this and coming back.
Oh gosh, amazing. Yeah, no, thank you. I feel like feels like you feel like a familiar soul, and I'm glad we found each other again.
Likewise. All right, we'll talk
All
to you
right.
later then.
All right. Bye-bye.